Happy 2020, everybody. It's cold and rainy and blustery. I'm gonna hang out here under the canopy if you guys don't mind. So with the end of one year and the beginning of another, you know, it's a good time to reflect on things. I know that's kind of cliche, but especially in the case of a gardener or a farmer, it really is a good time to look back on the previous year, on the previous growing season, and see what did you do right, what did you do wrong, and how can we learn from that. So I'm going to kind of start on a downer note, but the advantage to that is we get to end everything on the positive side. So let's start with the biggest fail of the year, and that really was the fruit trees. The apples especially, I didn't get any apples. Even though I was trying to spray on a regular basis, cleaning up under the tree, thinning the apples, none of that worked. One thing I'm going to try this year that I've never done before is a dormant spray. I know, I should have done that years ago. That is primary goal number one going into this next season. I don't have so much problem with disease issues. Primary issue is bugs. They have taken out the last 2 years of apples, and I want to prevent that. Not only for my own sake, but for my neighbors. If my trees are breeding pest insects, then that's not good for anybody around me who might be trying to grow fruit as well. My other perennials, my blueberries, those have always been reasonably good producers. For some reason this year, I got very little, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if it was pruning or if it was just a lack of nutrients in the soil. I want to think that it's a lack of nutrients. I did not put any fertilizer down after pruning, and I always seem to get the best results out of plants when I fertilize them after pruning them in the late winter. I might try pruning a little bit less as well on those blueberries and hope that they produce better this next season. The next thing is the raspberries. Not as many raspberries grew back this year, except over off into, where are we? Off into the shady part of the yard. Can't really explain why. Not really practical to have them back there, because if there's too much shade, they're not going to produce any berries. So we need to get those out of there next year. But at the same time, I need to also put down some type of fertility on these raspberries for the next year. You saw me try to correct partially the orientation of the rows. In previous years, they've gone east to west, which kind of shaded out the back row. And so this year I want to try and reorient those north to south so that the rows get an even amount of sunlight throughout the day during the summer. And then there's the Concord grapes. I'm pretty sure my failure with the Concord grapes was just laziness and arrogance. I thought that the little scarecrow owl that I had gotten was gonna be good enough to keep most of the pests away. As soon as I put that owl out, I got no crows, no other birds in that garden, and I figured I'm good to go. All I need to do is put down some repellent for the rodents and other critters, and I'll be fine. Well, the trouble is as soon as those grapes started to ripen, as soon as the food there began to ripen, the birds began to get bolder with each passing day. And eventually, because I don't get to go out there and monitor the garden each and every day, the birds finally came in and got everything. Of course, I was also lazy putting up the netting, again because of that owl that I figured was going to do the trick. The bird netting in the past, combined with the animal repellent, that has been golden for me over the past few years, and I didn't do that this year. From now on, as soon as those grapes are large enough, probably right around the end of August, critter repellent goes down, bird netting goes up. So this fail might sound kind of weird, but I didn't give up on some of my plants soon enough. right around the end of September, early October, if you don't have ripe fruits in this area, they're not gonna get ripe. I really thought that we were going to get a little bit of an Indian summer this year, and that just didn't happen. I shouldn't have thought that it would happen because the whole summer was cooler than normal anyway. I thought we'd get enough sun, but the problem is you can get sun, but if you don't get the temperatures on top of that, the plants just aren't going to grow. They're not going to move energy around inside the plant. And in some cases, they're just going to start to die. The fruit just wasn't finished when the plant started to give it up for the season. What not giving up on the crop soon enough did was it did not allow me to get the cover crops in the ground soon enough to get them established for the winter. And so what you'll see is just this big gap in the middle of my two cover crops. Related to that was my choice of corn varieties. So the corn was kind of a mixed bag because on the one hand it did really well. I'm really happy with the corn. On the other hand, I chose a variety that was a really long season. I want to say it was at least 110, maybe 115 day. That's really too long in this region, I think. Our seasons are deceptively short. And so if you want to do cover crops, you got to get your crop out of the ground so that you can get that cover crop established soon enough. Now, I could have done intercropping, so I could have planted the cover crop in the corn before it was done. The trouble is I had to walk all over it in the process, so I just don't think that that's the best way to go in my circumstance. And then one other fail was I didn't get my soil tested during the winter. I'm going to do that this winter, probably in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to get a complete soil analysis done on this garden bed back here. Hopefully in the next couple of years I'll get soil tests done on every section, under the apple tree, in the raspberries, under the blueberry, all of the things, so that I can see what is in my dirt and what does that dirt need in order to grow these crops effectively. It's going to tell me almost everything about what's in the dirt. It's not just going to give me pH and maybe nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It's going to give me all of my micronutrients. It's going to give me my base saturation. It's going to give me my cation exchange capacity. But it's really important to know what your CEC is in order to know how much fertility you can put down on your soil. And that's what I want to know going into this next year, so I'm not just randomly dumping nutrients into the ground. More importantly, spending money on these nutrients, because the only return on investment that I get is the food that I eat. I don't make any money off of this crop. This is completely a hobby garden. It's as important for me to get the right nutrients and the right amount of nutrients down as it is for even a real farmer, because again, I really can't spend money where I don't need it. I mean, to a degree, a farmer can kind of screw that up a little bit because he's at least going to make some money back on it. I'm not making any money on this. So I really have to be diligent as to what kind of nutrients am I putting down and how much. And then this last fail is actually going to transition into my successes for the year, and that's the corn. The corn was kind of a mixed bag. So since I'm focusing on failures right now, the failure of the corn was primarily in the varieties that I chose, and that was because they were too long a season. The Jimmy Red, while I got plenty of corn and it was really good, it's got to be somewhere around 110 day or more. The Glass Gem corn had to have been a similar season, and so that means it's not getting, it's not finishing off until middle to late October. and that's too late to put down a cover crop. If I take you out there, and I'm not because you're just going to get blasted with wind noise, you'll see that where the Jimmy Red and the glass gem corn is, that cover crop has not established itself because I couldn't get the corn out soon enough. So to correct that, I'm going to use corn varieties that are no more than about 100 day. And the kind of the double failure was really that glass gem corn. The glass gem corn looks really, really cool, but for me, where I'm at here, day length is just too long. And then couple that with it's not good. Yeah. And it hardly popped at all. The corn just ended up being a little bit of a mixed bag. It was a lot of fun. I'm definitely growing more corn in the future, but I'm going to be using shorter day varieties. That moves me to the successes. So we'll go right into the corn. The corn was one of my favorite things to grow this year. Again, that Jimmy Red turned out really good. And if you're in a little bit warmer region of the country, I would absolutely encourage you to grow that stuff. It's big and it produces a lot. Also, the Dakota Black popcorn that I grew, that has also turned out really good. The popcorn is great and it's consistent. So I'm going to grow that next year. I think too, the fertility that I put down, even though I was kind of putting it down blind, that turned out to be the right thing to do. Corn grew really well. I didn't see any evidence of disease, and it dried down instead of just dying. So kind of the other mixed bag was the corn sheller. The first time I put it together, obviously it didn't work out. The second one I put together did work. There's just a couple of things that I left off of it that I should have put on before I started using it, but overall it's done pretty good. I think also that I need to make sure that I'm using a corn that grows a little bit bigger, like the Jimmy Red, and even the Dakota Black did very well going through the sheller. But the glass gem corn, because it naturally grows a little bit shorter, didn't seem to do as well going through that sheller. The other success, and this was early on in the season, was the cover crops. Everywhere I put down those cover crops, I had an outstanding seed bed and very little weed pressure. What I should have done, and what I'm going to do next year, I'm not going to take off the cover crop until I'm ready to plant. So the day I take the cover crop off is the day I'm planting. That will hopefully reduce the weed pressure and allow the crop to canopy and choke out any weeds that do germinate. The other thing that I'm excited about was the wheat. I'm growing more wheat this coming season. It was really fun to go out there and cut it down and put it through the thresher. I think I've worked out some of the kinks in the thresher, and I'm going to use that one this year and maybe try and play around with it and see if I can't improve it and make it even better. Another success were the trellises. Super excited about the trellises that I made and the trellises that I purchased in the form of those cattle panels. The cattle panels are super light and super easy to move around. Couple that with the fence post pounder that I bought. It's just going to make putting in those trellises really easy in the future. You saw me take them out. That takes minutes. It's wonderful. Whereas in the past, I've tried to use netting or string, and it takes forever. It gets tangled in everything, and then when it's time to take the dead plants off of it, it's super hard to get off, and you pretty much have to throw it away. I'm really excited to use those next season. You know what I mean? It's windy. So with the strawberries, I moved them this year. I got them out of the garden area and over into the raised beds. And I'm not a big fan of raised beds, but I think in this circumstance, it might just work out because it gets the strawberries a little bit higher up and easier to pick. The soil drains a little bit better. I think it's going to work out better than where they were at in the garden. It obviously clears out a lot of space in that garden for other crops, and I don't have to be constantly avoiding them or stepping over them once a lot of the crops get bigger later in the summer. And the last thing is the table grapes. The table grapes got eaten by the birds, but they also got eaten by us. and they produced a ton of fruit. I mean, more fruit than we could possibly eat. Still learned a couple of things. I think next year I'm gonna try and thin the table grapes so that maybe we get bigger grapes, and then, you know, we're able to actually eat them all rather than leaving them there to rot on the vine. So all in all, I've been really happy with the way the year has actually gone. I learned a lot through the things that I failed to get, and I still learned a lot from the things that I succeeded with. I really appreciate you guys watching these videos. I hope you'll stick with me here in the next coming season as I apply what I've learned this past season, not only in the garden, but also here on these videos. Hope to have not only better content for you in the coming weeks, but more consistent content. Speaking of the coming weeks, I hope to get soil tests this month, and then coming up at the end of the month is the beginning of the next season, and that's pruning. Thanks for watching. If you do like these videos, please hit that thumbs up button. I hope you'll subscribe to this channel and grow along with us. Thanks for watching.